Hello everyone, I'm Susanna Grigoryan. I'm currently studying at Masters of Science in Economics in American University of Armenia. And under the name of the Better Policy Project and the Global Forecasting School, I want to say my thanks to the staff of Global Forecasting School and to my beloved Professor Douglas Laxton for giving me this opportunity to explain the most important variables and the most important topics about the FPAS Mark 1 and Mark 2, known as Forecasting and Policy Analysis System, and the role of this system in the monetary policy and central banks. So first of all, talking about the monetary policy, we have to think it about as a water tap. We are opening it and we are waiting for the water to come for 6 months or maybe more than a year. So thinking in this way, we have to understand that there are huge time lags here, and we have to understand that under this time lags, the credibility of the institutions in the case of the fiscal policies, the government, and in the case of the monetary policies are mainly the central banks, is very important to address the credibility of them. So that within this credibility, we are solving a very important issue, which is anchoring inflation and inflation expectations, so that our economy is being more stable. So thinking about what is that the central banks who adopted already the forecasting and policy analysis system, the FPAS, is making different from the countries who haven't done it yet. So the first one, let's bring an example. Three countries, Japan, Czech Republic, and the FDI from the USA. So in case of Japan, we are facing with lots of challenges. For example, zero lower bond because of some savings cuts, aging population, and diminishing marginal returns or marginal utilities of additional productions and so on. So the monetary policy in Japan is mainly focused on quantitative and qualitative easing, and they are not focusing on the inflation targeting, though they are using other tools to anchor inflation. But because of the zero lower bond, they practically cannot use their tool, one of the most important tool, which is the interest rate regulation. So that the Japan is doing lots of interventions to make their currency more stable in the international economic sphere. So the next country is the Czech Republic. I'm not going to dive deep into what's the, let's say, history behind the Czech Republic's policy-making system in terms of the monetary policy. I'm just going to say that once Czech Republic pegged its currency with the euro, which created lots of, let's say, pressures of appreciations of this koruna in their national currency, so that made lots of problems because the Czech Republic was and is still a small and open economy, trading with other economies in a huge amount of prices, so that the demand and the supply of the koruna is very important to address. Another thing is that they started to adopt the FPAS Mark II, and once they started to adopt this framework and start inflation targeting, the whole macroeconomic stability changed in a positive way, so that they could manage to achieve more stable exchange rate, they could achieve more stable interest rates and inflations accordingly. So the other example of not adopted FPAS framework, a central bank, let's say, is the FDI. FDI is very complicated institution because the market that it is regulating is complicated too. So because of this problem, FDI cannot trust only in a single framework like FPAS Mark 1 or even Mark 2. So they are using a bunch of other equations and lots of other transmission mechanisms that we, so for example, Czech Republic doesn't face because of its small and open economy situation. Well, so talking about what is the difference between the countries who are adopting FPAS Mark 1 and the countries who are not adopting FPAS Mark 1 or even Mark 2 is first of all about the elevator economics. You noticed I spoke about these two countries, about the FDI and Japan, in a way that they are facing lots of fluctuations, and because they are facing with these fluctuations, they are perceiving the macroeconomic monetary variables in a way that they can at some part exclude the transmission mechanism then, meaning that the human behavior is very important, and even the same shocks hit different economies, there are going to be different outcomes. So because of that, the elevator economics is being more widely used in the economies who are not using FPAS Mark 1 and Mark 2 framework. For example, the countries that are adopting FPAS Mark II, for example, the Bank of Canada, the New Zealand, Czech Republic, respectively, the Republic of Armenia, these central banks are always approaching to the monetary policy in a systematic and structural decision-making way. So meaning that they are addressing all the issues in the economy, they are understanding all the challenges and the risks that the economy has, and they are trying to understand what policy tool would be effective to address these challenges and to solve short-term or long-term inflation stability problems. So one of the problems is this, and the other thing that I'm going to talk about is the baseline scenario. Although non-FPAS Mark 1 countries could also have baseline scenario, but the approach to that is being different. FPAS Mark II countries also have scenario-based analysis, meaning that we are conducting lots of researches on where is the economy now, how it is changing, and what are the challenges between the traditional thinking and, let's say, in a more innovative thinking in here, is that in case of FPAS Mark countries, they are more challenging the traditional thinking, so that they are more flexible to changes, not only in the economy, but also in the policy-making system, which is very important. The next one is the policy credibility and the risk management that I've just talked about a little bit. Just want to say that policy credibility is the thing that comes endogenously from the central banks themselves, because they are using their policy tools in a aggressively, sufficiently way to anchor inflations and inflation expectations. So in the other countries, sometimes they are being too late to address their policies. So after this, being too late, they are either going to, for example, wage price spirals or the lower zero bound problem that I've just talked about. So here are the let's say, dark corners in the economy that we don't want to be in. The thing is that we are also eliminating the type 1 and type 2 error when we are using the FPAS Mark II, which is meaning that we are also addressing at least 3 scenarios that is going to happen, or most probably is going to happen in the economy. So with this type 1 and type 2 errors and understanding what we are going to use, policy making is being very adaptive. So that if we are using this policy and we see that market expectations are going in an unpredictable way, we can always back up things in a faster way if we are using FPAS Mark 1 or Mark 2 in our central banks. Of course, the differences of modeling are very important also. About this, I'm going to talk about later. So what is the difference between FPAS Mark 1 and FPAS Mark 2 central banks? The thing is that we are considering that policy agility in FPAS Mark II is over than the policy inertia, meaning that being flexible to changes of the key important indicators in the economy is very important in FPAS Mark II, because in FPAS Mark 1, we are just having a baseline scenario. And in this baseline scenario, there could be lots of risks. There could be also a risk that nothing in this baseline scenario would be true in real-time economies. And also, we are considering that the relationships between key variables and indicators in the economy are linear, which is a huge false thing to do, because we are considering that in real world, there is no linear relationship between variables, meaning that constant change of something is not leading to a constant change of something else. So we are not avoiding in dark corners, let's say, in FPAS Mark 1 framework. But in FPAS Mark 2 framework, we have a chance to avoid them. The also important part is that in FPAS Mark 2, we are addressing 3 very important questions. First one is that where is the economy now? Addressing where are we now, meaning that what are the key variables here? What conditions are we now at this point in a short term? The second question is, what patterns do we have in the economy? Where is the economy evolving? So where are we going? And the third question is that based on the patterns that we are having in the economy, it is important to know what are the key tools or anchors that we are going to use to achieve our goals, which is addressing the inflation stability. So here are these questions, and in FPAS Mark 1 country, central banks, we are not addressing these questions. We are addressing only the first two questions, leaving behind the third question, which is really important to understand because basically all the policy making system is based on that one question. Let's speak about the flexible organizational structure in FPAS Mark 2 countries, like the Republic of Armenia and the Central Bank of Armenia. Well, the Central Bank of Armenia has a very adaptable organizational structure in the monetary policy department because its hierarchical structure doesn't limit people to address questions in an open way, so that the case A and case B and case X or Y scenarios are being as realistic as possible. So it doesn't really mean that we are applying conditions and counting probabilities of what is going to be happening in the future. We are just explaining that in case A scenario, it is going to be an expansionary shock, so that our inflation would be higher, so that we have to adapt our inflation rate higher, adequate to our exchange rate and also the interest rate. So we are regulating the other parameters with their interest rate. The case B scenario basically addressed the exact opposite. What if we are going to deflation scenario? What are we going to do in that point? And there is also case X and case Y scenario, which is basically about what if the central bank loses its credibility, for example, and we are addressing the issues and how we are going to solve these kind of problems. Because if there is no constant credibility from the public towards the central bank, it means that central bank has to change its equations about the transition mechanisms in the market. That is an ongoing process in a very faster pace, so that everything changes unbelievably fast in this case. So there are also two intellectual rules of inflation targeting. First of all, I've already talked about, which is the nominal interest inflation targeting. I'm not going to talk about too much, but the most important thing is that we cannot use three anchors at the same time in the monetary policy, meaning that the monetary aggregates, the exchange rate regulation, and the inflation as the state target can be regulated at the same time. So we have to choose which one. In the case of Armenia, the history showed that the most efficient way of stabilizing the monetary conditions in Armenia is the inflation targeting, because we already had the aggregates targeting, and it was not so sufficient because of some differences of the transition mechanism in Armenia, which led to lots of difficulties. So we also consider the exchange rate target, but the exchange rate target also brings other problems, for example, the appreciation problems, or for example, the problem of choosing the currency of pegging with, for example, which we are mostly connected economically, or the currency which we are trading mostly in terms of lots of opportunities. So the inflation targeting was the most efficient way to anchor market expectations, but not only that. Under that, we adopted FPAS Mark 1, and the next step was the FPAS Mark 2. So I've already talked about FPAS Mark 2, and the last thing that is really important to say is about the next intellectual rule, that root of inflation targeting. We say that risk management approach is very important in terms of inflation targeting. So this concept should be viewed for the policymakers to assess lots of serious problems that is most probably going to happen in the country, and the unforeseen economic development would be more effective to have. So the risk management approach really solves lots of problems in case we are having loss functions in the endocrine model, which I'm going to talk about later. Well, the last question of mine is that how the endocrine models, endogenous credibility models, are going to solve the case A and case B scenario problems in the monetary policy in the Central Bank of Armenia. Well, these endocrine models highlight very important things. First one is that the credibility is a very important variable in calculating the equations. So before that, in FPAS Mark 1, there was the canonical semi-structural linear multi-currently equation that we were using, which is already linear, as I said, and didn't consider lots of other traps that can probably happen in the economy. But in endocrine model, we are using non-linear relationships. For example, just accounting that the Phillips curve is non-linear in this concave is very important to understand how to use this curve in terms of policy making. And it's really important to know where are we in that curve. The other thing is that the FPAS Mark II also solves lots of problems for the policymakers in the bank, for the board members' perspective and also for the staff's perspective. For the board members' perspective, it's better because we are, in this case, having more communication with the staff, and the board members are receiving frequent data about where is the economy now and what are the case A and case B scenarios, but in a way so that they can be more skeptic in making decisions with these scenarios, and they are also having their own opinion there while having their decisions. So this 29-day of policymaking round is repeating over and over again, helping the board members to constantly be updated about the economy. The next one is about the staff and what is the FPAS Mark II making the staff better. First of all, it's because high-frequent researches are encouraging the staff not to be bored sometimes of doing the same things over and over again, and using some narratives that would help them to dive deep into some other concepts that might happen in our economy with the mentors are very important because they are using lots of experimental economic part which drives the FPAS Mark II into further development. The next one is the communication that I've already talked about because the hierarchical way of organizational structure doesn't tie us to address the issues or the researches that we have found or maybe the findings that we already have. And also the interesting and applying work-life balance is very important to address because some economists and macroeconomists in macroeconomic department are working in the same project so that the work-life balance of the economists and the spreadness of the information across the central bank is really huge, so that the quality of the professionals are very high. And with this, there is no information asymmetry happening in the Central Bank of Armenia, which is the most important thing of maintaining the inner credibility, let's say, in the Central Bank of Armenia under the framework of FPAS Mark II. So here are the advantages that we have in FPAS Mark II. I would later on make an additional video about the endocrine models and how do we solve and approach to these models to highlight the issues of FPAS Mark II. So later on, thank you for your time and goodbye.